Thank you, Mike. Your Excellency, Leader of the Opposition, ministerial colleagues, members of Parliament, members of local government. Nigel McBride, and thank you, Nigel, for that illuminating opening. And I do want to go to the challenges that you raised there. I think you've opened up an interesting debate about what is happening in the current political circumstances that we find ourselves in. But before I do, I must just observe what an extraordinary week. Who could have thought that you could have bumped the Queensland election and the leadership woes of the federal government off the front page, but the Northern Territory government managed to do it? I mean, a midnight coup, and then a 1 a.m. media conference. And then, of course, standing up next to each other at happy families. It was magnificent. Only the Northern Territorians could do it. But I think this is rich with possibility for us now. I've actually instructed my Minister for Defence Industries to immediately head to the border and carry out a reconnaissance, because I think there's a real opportunity for us to retake our Northern Territory. But Can I return to the serious points that I think Nigel was making? He really made 3 points. He's saying, what the goodness is going on, and he's really posed 3 explanations. One is it arrogance? Is it how we're selling the message? And the third thing he said, well, what is the? I think he raised a general point about whether the electorate will ever tolerate a change of this sort, whatever the explanation. And I want to pick them up because they're really important. The first question is arrogance. There is undoubtedly an extraordinary arrogance which has led to the consequences for the various governments that we've seen around the nation getting a hiding. I mean, I'll just take one example because I think it crystallises the point. When it looks like your leader is actually going to lose the election, you send a message to the electorate, actually we'll get back to you after the election about who the Premier is going to be. If you think the people of Queensland, the people of Australia are going to buy that nonsense, then you get what you deserve. It's treating the people with contempt. Minimum basic idea is you get to know who the Premier is going to be after the election. And it's no surprise that they got the hiding that they did. There are a few other choice pieces, like actually we're promising this for you, but only if this guy gets re-elected. That was pretty special. It's like a species of corruption to me, but nevertheless. And then just the generalised idea, it's my way or the highway. That approach, if it ever worked, doesn't work today. The second thing you posed is it the way in which we communicate, and this whole idea of imposing things on the electorate and therefore then getting this negative reaction. I think that's also true in part of what's going on at the moment. But it didn't have to. It has not always been that way. I mean, we've had significant reform which has been advanced by governments, national governments, in this nation. Look at all the reforms of the mid-'80s, where we were essentially internationalising the Australian economy. We had Paul Keating, Bob Hawke out there talking about macroeconomic and microeconomic reform. In some respects, and we were talking about J-curves. Some of us probably didn't even understand what we were being told. But the truth is we were being taken into the confidence of those elected leaders. We were being treated with respect because we were having the thing explained to us. I mean, I think Keating famously said even the neighbourhood parrots talking about microeconomic reform, because they were actually conducting the argument. They were running the arguments and conducting the debate in the nation. That's essential. And the third thing, and this is where I probably depart a little from Nigel, I'm not as gloomy about the whole position that he puts. Will people ever accept major change? Because I think the failing of some of the reforms is that they haven't seemed fair. There's not been equity in the way in which change has been made. This has been the fundamental problem with the federal budget. You can't say we've got this budget emergency and debt crisis, but then at the same time impose measures which don't make sense to people. where the great burden of the adjustment falls on those that can least afford it, and you let other people off the hook scot-free. It's the equity perception of the changes. It's basically the merits of the proposition which fundamentally were at fault in advancing some of these things. So I think you can reform if you're prepared to treat people with respect and not be arrogant, if you are prepared to have the debate, if you're prepared to run the arguments and actually, as we've said, debate and decide rather than announce and defend, and if you are prepared to actually advance ideas which have balance, which actually meet both sides of the debate. Now, we launched an economic vision for South Australia back in August. At its heart was this balance. It's about making South Australia the place where people and business thrive. Not where business thrives and bugger the people, or where people thrive and business languishes, but where there is a balance, which has always been the South Australian way. We want to keep our livability, but we also want this to be a place that thrives. We want it to be the place where there is a fair go, but you also want it to be the place where you can have a go and get a business up and actually look after yourself and your family by becoming prosperous through your individual enterprise and endeavour. Both of those things have to travel together. If they don't, that's why reform fails. Now, I've also noticed that some of the commentators have been saying things like, oh, well, this is all a disaster, you can't do anything in this place, and therefore governments around the nation are going to move away from reform. Well, we've done things differently here in South Australia. There's a reason why, as an incumbent government, we suffered the smallest swing against us of any government that's faced the election in recent memory. And it's because we have continued to engage with people and we have treated them with respect and we have been putting significant policy ideas. In the 6 months leading up to an election, everybody said we were going to lose. We published 14 new policies. On the first day of the election campaign, we published a manifesto for the future of South Australia which had 200 new additional initiatives. And during the course of the campaign, we promoted them, we argued them, and we debated them. Now, the truth is, we were re-elected narrowly, and we had to recalibrate. We had to recognise that that result was not overwhelming. We had to go back and reflect on that result. Not blame the electorate and say, oh, we've got a crook electoral system, or they didn't understand the preferential voting system, or, in the words of Tony Abbott, they absent-mindedly voted for certain state governments or against certain state governments, as though they'd misplaced the Liberal government. I mean, that sort of high-handed arrogance is the pathway to a political oblivion. What we did is recalibrated. We reached out to new people, Minister Brock, because we needed a relationship with the regions. We reached out to Minister Hamilton Smith because we needed a relationship with business. And we recalibrated our agenda. We set a new economic vision for the future of South Australia. 10 new significant ideas, priorities for the future of our state. And we did that because we understood that one of the big messages out of the election was that people wanted bold change. They didn't want to settle for incremental change. We thought we were being bold. We put forward what we thought were very important changes, but people were telling us they wanted more. And we are determined to give them more. That's why we advanced the work cover reforms. Now, the work cover reforms were difficult for us. They involved massive change to our system of workers' rehabilitation and compensation, something that reform that had eluded governments of both persuasions through the whole of the period of the existence of the 1987 Act. We took it on, we delivered it reform through the Parliament in the first 12 months in record time with massive consensus. It will deliver a $180 million benefit to the business community in South Australia. Now, we talk about tax cuts and relief and those sorts of issues. That is the largest single benefit that's been handed back to the business community in South Australia in living memory. And that's at a minimum. And that starts from the 1st of July. And we've continued to take steps which are bold. We stepped up and underwrote a Near Star deal. Over $100 million of state government guarantee to make sure Near Star put in the hundreds of millions of dollars to guarantee the future of a multi-metal processing plant in Port Pirie and frankly guarantee the future of Port Pirie. An incredibly bold plan for the future. And we're stepping up to attract businesses, Oz Minerals, Hewlett-Packard. And we are prepared to take risks to drive jobs growth in South Australia. We stand by our decision in Gilman. If a business comes to us and pitches to us economic activity and jobs for a piece of property that's been laying there for 30 years idle, we're going to respond to that every single time. Now, I know that there are people in South Australia that are very concerned about their economic future. They want us to step up and do new things in new ways. That's why, in the lead up to a very important speech that the Governor will deliver on behalf of the government next Tuesday, we are going to outline a bold vision for the rest of this term of government. You've already seen evidence of the nature of that reform with the health reform agenda. The Transforming Health agenda is taking on one of the toughest issues that exist in government. This is the largest proportion of our budget. This is probably the single most important reason people believe government exists, to look after their health and well-being. The truth is we have a hospital system that's grown up over 100 years of a series of discrete units, all in their own ways, providing excellent services, but as a whole, we're getting substandard outcomes. People talk about the risk of losing lives. We are losing lives unnecessarily at the moment because we have too many services scattered over too many sites. We need specialist attention so that we can get the level of volume and the skills and capabilities in the places where they are needed at every single time of the day. One statistic which is frightening is that we have the breaststroke survival rates in the world, between 9 and 5. If you get delivered to the wrong hospital at the wrong time of day, you can get very worse results than the national average. That's unacceptable. We have an imperative to reform. Is it easy? No. Is it going to be controversial? Of course it is. But what we are doing is taking people into our confidence by giving them the facts, by showing them what the clinicians have told us, by putting quality at the centre of the agenda and asking us to come on the reform journey with us. And that is the approach that we will take with every one of our endeavours that we'll be revealing over the coming weeks of months. As you're aware, back in August we did launch these 10 priorities for the economic vision of South Australia, and I want to single out 2 of them today. The priority concerning South Australia, the best place to do business, and the priority concerning South Australia as having the place which has international connections and engagement. In relation to South Australia being the best place to do business, it is often the case that the argument quickly turns into a trimmed-down debate about tax. The truth is, being the best place to do business involves many things. It involves your planning system, it involves your bureaucracy and your regulatory arrangements. It also involves a business cost environment that exists outside the taxation system. We've spoken just before about work cover. But taxation also has another role. It also provides the services and the level of amenity that we've come to love and enjoy in this place. It's no mistake that we live in a place which is so beautiful and livable and safe. It's because we've made public investments in those matters over the years. Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, once famously said, "Taxes are the price we pay for civilisation." They are necessary to achieve the things that we want. But we also need to make sure that businesses have an environment where they can have a go. We have a tax system which we are going to engage in a thoroughgoing review of. Elements of it are best practice. Elements of it are worst practice. We have the lowest payroll tax in the nation. South Australia has the highest land tax and the highest stamp duty in the nation. But we know that and different taxes have different effects on our level of economic activity. Stamp duty is regarded as one of the worst taxes. Land tax is regarded as one of the least distorting taxes. But if we're to really grasp this ambition for South Australia to be the best place to do business, it won't be realised unless we are able to engage in a thoroughgoing debate about tax. This is probably even harder than healthcare reform, but we are determined to embark upon that process. And next week we'll be making some further announcements about the steps that we'll be taking to commence that debate. I turn now to the priority concerning our international engagement. South Australia, if it is to take this extraordinary landmass, 1 million hectares with only 1.7 million people, if it is to survive in an increasingly competitive and open world, it has to trade and make investment relationships with the rest of this nation and the rest of the world. And South Australia is committed to the internationalisation of its economy and society. And in international markets, time zones are important. The rapid development of Singapore as a financial centre, for example, was largely due to its time zone, which allowed it to operate after the San Francisco market closed and before the Zurich market opened. The time zone in which an economy operates can help impede or promote basic business transactions. It is therefore my intention and my announcement today to ask Minister for Trade and Investment Martin Howard-Smith to lead a public debate about the appropriateness of us continuing to have a half-hour time difference from the conventional time zone. To realise our potential in a global economy, we need to alter the way we are viewed in the world. We need to alter the way we are viewed in this nation. Our time zone is viewed both within Australia and overseas as something of an anomaly. Imagine how our 30-minute difference from the conventional time zone is viewed in China, which from 1949 has operated on a single time zone. This issue is open to conjecture in some quarters. We know it's a controversial debate, but we're determined to have the debate. The argument for change will therefore require a thorough explanation about the essential issue here. Why? Why do we make this change? And who benefits and who is affected? That's the essence of communication which is going to take the community with us so that we can take mass opinion and turn it into informed public judgment. I expect the debate will be hotly contested, but I believe that South Australians understand the importance of developing greater confidence of this state within an international context. The days when countries and states could prosper working in isolation have long ended. We've moved from an independent to an interdependent age. And I would argue we're moving from old Adelaide to new Adelaide, old South Australia to new South Australia. We need to also take what we have in this beautiful state to the world through our trade and investment strategies. And a further initiative I wish to announce today is that we'll be releasing in advance details of ministerial visits throughout the course of the year. The purpose of doing that is to build on the excellent work that has already been undertaken with Business SA and other groups for businesses to accompany us on these ministerial visits. These ministerial visits, in particular in relation to places like China, are greatly enhanced when business and government can be seen working in lockstep. So it's our intention, each May, a senior minister will lead a business delegation to China. This year I'll lead the delegation and will be accompanied by Martin Howard-Smith. And each September, to coincide with the Royal Adelaide Show, we'll invite an inbound delegation from China. Each August, a senior ministerial delegation will travel to India. This year the delegation will be led by Minister Martin Howard-Smith, and we will invite a return delegation each January. And at the end of August, I'll lead a delegation to Malaysia and Indonesia. Each year at the end of August, I will lead a delegation to some part of Southeast Asia. And we'll soon announce the timing of a regular inbound mission from Southeast Asia. The release of a forward plan for senior ministerial visits will also include a delegation to the United States in January to coincide with the Good Day USA events at that time. Now, Business SA has always been a strong supporter of our trade missions. We're releasing this forward plan so that more Business A members can participate in government-led missions in the future. And the presence of ministers alongside businesses will add enormously to the success of these experiences. I want to give you this pledge. The coming days and weeks will involve some very substantial new initiatives which are going to be challenging for some South Australians. But it's also the beginning of a very exciting period in South Australia. It's a period of excitement which we want the people in this room to embrace. We need the business community to work alongside us because it's only through partnership that South Australia will be able to succeed. I want to thank Business SA for its constructive approach in its relationship with government. I look forward to a constructive relationship with the Leader of the Opposition so that the whole of the South Australian Parliament can get behind this imperative to transform and modernise our economy for the benefit of each and every South Australian.